There has always been this weird feeling, that feeling of someone looking at you from a distance. As a woman, I could feel eyes focused on my body from a distance whenever I visited my brother's house. The problem was, looking around, there was no one there. Frankly, I hated being at his house. His wife Lisa and I didn't get along too well. That is my fault because at their wedding I got too drunk and said something that I shouldn't have. I even tried to apologize. But she is just one of those people who forgives, but never forgets. Well, regardless of the way we felt, I was stuck with her for a month and she was stuck with me. And what made it all worse was my brother had to go out of town for work, effectively leaving me and Lisa alone at the house. Now, a little bit about my brother. He is a war veteran. The boy ain't never been right in the head, if you know what I mean. He has always felt like this country was going to hell in a handbasket. And unlike most people who talk about it and do nothing, well, Timmy lived his life according to what he thought. 55 acres north of Dallas, Texas, close to the Oklahoma border. The first night alone with Lisa was awkward. We barely spoke, and when we did, it was just about mundane things. As night fell, the house was silent except for the occasional creaking of the wooden floorboards. I decided to take a walk outside, hoping the fresh air would help clear my mind. The moon was bright, casting long shadows across the vast property. The chirping of crickets was the only sound that broke the silence. As I walked, I felt that familiar sensation of being watched. I looked around, but there was no one in sight. I tried to shake off the feeling, attributing it to my strained relationship with Lisa. But then I heard it. A low growl coming from the tree line. My heart raced as I tried to locate the source. That's when I saw it, a pair of glowing eyes watching me intently. The creature was tall, with a canine-like face, and standing on two legs. Panic surged through me, and I ran back to the house, locking the door behind me. Breathing heavily, I told Lisa what I'd seen. She looked skeptical, but concerned. "It's probably just a coyote or something," she said, though her voice wavered slightly. The next day, I tried to forget about the encounter, but as night approached, I couldn't shake off the feeling of unease. Lisa and I decided to watch a movie to distract ourselves. Halfway through, we heard a loud thud against the window. We both jumped, and Lisa cautiously approached the window to look outside. She gasped. Pressed against the window was a large paw print, much bigger than any dog's. We could hear the creature circling the house, its growls growing louder and more menacing. Terrified, we barricaded ourselves in the bedroom. Throughout the night, we heard it scratching at the doors and windows, trying to find a way in. The next morning, the signs of the creature's presence were everywhere. Broken branches, deep claw marks on the walls of the house, and large footprints leading back to the woods. Determined to confront whatever was terrorizing us, Lisa and I decided to take matters into our own hands. We knew Timmy kept a couple of guns in the house for protection. After making sure they were loaded, we stepped outside, the cold night air sending shivers down our spines. The property was eerily silent, with only the distant sound of crickets chirping. We walked side by side, guns at the ready, eyes scanning the tree line for any sign of movement. The weight of the situation pressed down on us. Suddenly, we heard rustling from the trees. Without a word, we both aimed our guns in the direction of the noise and fired several rounds into the air. The deafening sound echoed through the night, and for a moment everything went silent. We waited, our breaths held, but nothing emerged from the tree line. The only evidence of any presence was the continued rustling, now moving further away. Whatever it was, it seemed we had scared it off, at least for the night. We retreated back to the house, locking every door and window. Neither of us could sleep, so we stayed up, talking and listening for any signs of the creature's return. The night passed without further incident. The following days were quiet. The sense of being watched had disappeared, and there were no more signs of the creature. When Timmy returned, we recounted our terrifying experience to him. He looked at us skeptically, a smirk forming on his lips. "You two have quite the imagination," he chuckled, clearly not believing a word. But Lisa and I knew what we had experienced.
It's been storming here. every day for the past few weeks. My home has a front porch that has a screen door, which I keep locked as I love to leave my front door open to get fresh air. Last night, I locked the screen door and left the front door open, as usual. Whilst I worked in the kitchen preparing dinner, I started getting that feeling that someone was watching me from the front door. But the screen was locked, and it would be virtually impossible for someone to be there, so I just continued cooking. After preparing dinner, I walked over to the front door to close it. That is when I noticed large, muddy boot prints right outside the front door. I don't know who was watching me, but someone was. So that morning, on my way to work, I just checked the screen door and it hadn't been tampered with. Over the next few days, I saw those same muddy boot prints every morning, even when it had stopped raining for days at a time. I have a very nosy neighbour named Beth. She is the old lady who spies on everyone and calls herself the Neighbourhood Watch. She told me something so frightening that I have been considering moving ever since. The man who owned the house before me left the property one night and he just simply packed his essentials and everything that could fit into the truck, and he got the hell out of here. Beth said that he would complain about muddy boot prints outside his door every week. So she began to watch the house at night, and that is when she saw a dark figure appear at the base of the steps and walk up through the screen door without opening it and stand there at the front door. The night he moved out, he told her he saw it, and that's all he told her, and then he sped off. So I was distraught, and not knowing what to do, I went to my sister-in-law, who is one of those sensitive types to these things. She came over, and as she walked up the steps, she simply stopped, and then the colour drained out of her face, and she stared at the front door, and she began to shake, and she grabbed me by the hand and said that we needed to leave, and we needed to leave now and come back later. In the car, I absolutely begged her to tell me what she had seen. She only said, "It's best that you don't know." So when we reached her house, she called some of her church members, and 10 of them followed us back to my house, and that's when they surrounded the house and they prayed.
Lord Jesus Christ, please have your angelic army build up and remove all demons, their devices, and all their power from within this protective hedge, and have them sent to the abyss. Please have your angels destroy all demonic.
While they were praying, I entered the front door only to see the muddy boot prints on the hardwood floor leading from the kitchen to the front door. The prince stopped right at the threshold. She came to the porch and told me they prayed to the angels to put a protective barrier on my home. And when I looked back, my God, the prints were gone. Now, I haven't had anything strange since that day, but, she still will not tell me what she saw. My encounter with the faceless man happened this year during Mardi Gras. My boyfriend and I were driving around trying to find a place to park and catch a night parade on St. Charles Avenue. Somehow, we got lucky and got a spot on Marengo Street, 2 blocks away from the action. It was about 8:30, and the last parade of the day was about to pass by, so we grabbed our chairs, ladder and cooler and headed to St. Charles Avenue. We had been sitting there for a while drinking and talking to a few people when I realised I left my cell phone in the car. Initially, I didn't worry about it. The kids were with friends and I was having way too much fun to worry about a cell phone. And my boyfriend had his, so if we needed to call someone, we could, use his. Float 10 was passing when my boyfriend leapt in the air for some beads, tripping over the cooler and landing flat on his ass. The whole thing was funny, but he broke his cell phone when he fell. So now, with no means of communication and still with at least 2 hours left before the parade was over, I began to worry about my kids. So I said, I'm going to run to the car and get my cell phone. Walking back towards the car, the street away from the parade was not entirely deserted, but it was quiet. Everyone was behind me, and the noise of the party behind me helped with those isolated feelings that I was beginning to have. So then, as I get closer to the car, I noticed a person on the opposite side of the street. Now, it's Mardi Gras, so I think nothing of it at first, until I get this feeling. You know the way you feel when someone is looking at you? So I increased my pace whilst hitting the unlock button on my car keys. When I reached the car, I opened the driver's side door, which was on the street. I didn't want to open the passenger side because it was dark on that side of the car from a row of trees that were in the front yard of a house. I had to reach into the car over to the passenger side floor to pick up my cell phone. And when I climbed back out of the car, phone in my hand, I looked up. On the other side of the car was someone or something standing there right at the passenger side door. At the time, I thought it was a person. But when I looked to try to make eye contact, there was nothing there. No eyes, no mouth, no lips or nose. Oh, I just froze. The best way to describe it, it was like a mannequin. But what was really weird, it had clothes on, including the Mardi Gras beads. I just stood there for a few seconds, long enough to see the blank face twitch. I thought, holy crap. So I slammed the car door and I took off running back to the parade. The first officer that I saw, I told him that someone was trying to break into my car, and I stood on the corner of St. Giles and Marengo. I watched him walk the 2 blocks to my car. Then I saw the officer circle the vehicle, but when he got to the passenger side, he just stood there for a few minutes. Then he briskly walked back towards me. And so I said, "Did you see anything?" This officer was a black man, not light-skinned black, I mean coffee black, and he looked pale. His eyes were wide open and he was sweating. And he just said, "Miss, I don't know what I just saw, but when it's time to leave, I will walk you back to your car." Now, the parade ended, and when I turned around, that officer, along with another officer on horseback, was there on the corner. They escorted me and my boyfriend back to the car. When we got to the car, I explained to him what happened. To this day, he doesn't believe me. But I will tell you, that officer saw it too, and it was freaky.
In 2009, I did an investigation of the abandoned Six Flags theme park in New Orleans East. The paranormal activity there was brought to my attention by several occultists. They used the second floor of the theater for their rituals. These rituals were intense and made use of mirrors to raise demonic entities from a book called The Goetia. I don't dare write or say the names of these entities, as it is a form of worship which strengthens them. It was very easy to gain access to the park if you knew the schedules of the security patrols. Inside this place, you get the feeling that you're constantly being watched. It's almost as if there's a crowd of people there along with you. The humid night air and strong breeze played tricks on my nerves as I tried to stay calm while walking. You can hear the most random sounds, thumps and squeaks, shutter doors closing. However, as I got closer to the theater, the area took a much more sinister feel. Now, I've been doing this for a long time, and the only instances where I get this type of sensation is when there's demonic energy present. The double French doors to the theater were already open, as if the building itself was waiting just for me. This is where I should have followed my gut instincts and called off this investigation, because looking up to the second floor balcony, I saw a huge orb of light move past the window. Now, for those of you who don't know, typically orbs are disembodied spirits, but they're never the size of this orb that I saw. It was the size of a basketball. Entering the building, there was a distinct difference in temperature from the humid, moist air outside. It was cool and dry. The smell of mold was making my nose flare and burn. The rituals were held on the second floor, where they configured mirrors in a circle. These were mirrors that they had found around the abandoned park, and they ranged in size from 5 feet to 8 feet. According to the cult leader, if I stood in the middle of the mirrors, the demon would show itself to me. So like an idiot, I did. Standing there, surrounded by these mirrors, initially I was amused, thinking to myself, these people say they conjured a demon. Yeah, right. Then, a few minutes later, it got real. Coming towards me across the wooden floor was the sound of these footsteps. As it got closer and closer, I could feel the actual floorboards move. Then in the mirror, I saw a hoof and a leg. My eyes traced upward to see what was the most abhorrent sight I'd ever seen in my life. It was the face of a lion with glowing red eyes. The hoofs and legs were attached directly to the face, and protruding out from the face were 7 other legs with hooves. There was no body, just a face with these legs protruding out of it. The face stared back at me from the mirror and made me feel helpless and powerless. Then it began to move from mirror to mirror, circling me, each hoof making contact with the reflection of the floor in the room and making a sound as if someone was circling me, walking around on the wooden floor from mirror to mirror. But the eyes were focused on me. No matter which way I turned my head, the face and the eyes were there. I began to feel lightheaded and dizzy, and as I moved forward trying to exit the area, I blacked out. When I awoke, it was 9 a.m. in the morning. A beam of light from one of the holes in the roof of the building shone directly on the center of my forehead. Coming to my senses, I ran out of the building. When I reached my car, I found scratch marks all over my body. But that was not all. I used my cell phone to provide light last night. When I looked at my phone, there was a voice recording. Strange thing is, I don't remember pressing record on my phone.